Hi, welcome to Our Queerbizhood. I'm Jay. I'm the founder of the LGBTQ plus business community radio or podcast, showcasing members of the LGBTQ plus business community from around the world. Each week, I have a new guest, someone from part of the community who is either a business owner, an entrepreneur, an artist, a musician, and find out part of their journey, how they got to be there, the bumps along the way, any advice for anyone that's just starting out, and have a general chat about what they're bringing to this world and what they're bringing to our community. For this week, I am interviewing Rocio Sanchez. Now, I'm hoping I've got that pronounced right. They are from France. They're a business marketing expert. They're also a co-author of the #1 best-selling LGBTQ plus for business strategies for the LGBTQ plus entrepreneur book. You may have seen it around. Rocio, thank you for coming on today. I appreciate your time. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit of who you are, how you started this journey along the way to have your business, and yeah, just a little bit of an introduction, really. Sorry, it's 8 p.m. and it's Monday. We've just all got back off the Christmas break, so bear with me. I'm a little bit tongue-tied today.
No worries. So yeah, thanks for introducing me. So yes, my name is Rocio Sanchez, and I'm an entrepreneur and digital marketer. I'm originally from New York City, first generation Dominican American. And I moved to Paris about 3 years ago for my master's studies. And now I'm planning to move to Amsterdam. My whole spiel is that I love to travel. I love to learn languages. And I kind of want to use those experiences to influence my work, So I've decided that my work, the people that I want to work with, are LGBT entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of color, specifically in the fashion industry, because that's where I pretty much got my start in the fashion industry. I went to the Fashion Institute of Technology to do my marketing degree, and in my master's studies, I wrote my master's thesis on LGBT fashion representation. So it's very important to me to kind of combine all three of those things: marketing, specifically digital marketing, fashion, and just LGBT representation. And working within that field has kind of opened up a lot of opportunities for me that I think I kind of just had to find for myself, or people just had to like say, hey, is this possible to do this job or to do this little freelance thing here and there? And it just kind of like snowballed, because I wouldn't have imagined this like 2 years ago when I started, or almost 2 years ago a year and a half ago, more like, when I started everything.
At the beginning of the pandemic or before the pandemic?
After, kind of at the beginning of the pandemic, and then a little bit after. So like basically I graduated in May of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't quite know exactly what I was going to do. I spent about 6 months in this deep job hunting like mode. And I was just increasingly frustrated, because every job interview that I went to, corporate or whatever, like, I mean, I have to say, it was also because I didn't know how to market myself or how to brand myself. But
Mm-hmm.
when they saw when they looked at my CV, my resume, they would just kind of not get it. Like they would be like, okay, master's thesis on LGBT fashion. Why does that matter to us? Like, oh, master's in fashion studies. Why does that matter to us? Oh, Fashion Institute of Technology and Marketing. And especially because I was in France. France, this is a whole other thing, but France specifically, they don't really care if you have work experience in the States unless it's a very, very, very well-known brand. So I worked with already with a lot of, being from New York and getting all these little internships here and there. I worked with a lot of startups actually while I was in New York. So I have about like 6-7 internships under my belt, but they're all pretty much like startups or well-known brands, but it just wasn't getting me anywhere. So about 6 months after graduating, I was just kind of disillusioned. kind of like graduating into the pandemic economy was really frustrating for me.
Yeah, I can imagine it would be.
Right. And then like I had like, just for full transparency, like $35,000 in debt, like student loan debt. That was Americans will understand. It was like frozen. It's still frozen. The interest accumulation is still frozen. But, a lot of Americans, they graduate with all this debt and they just immediately have this pressure on themselves to find a job.
To get the job and have that paid back.
Yeah, because that's what we're told. That's what we're promised. Go to school, go to a good school, get good grades, graduate, get a good job, pay your loan back. And, this is something that a lot of Americans go through, but especially in the pandemic, it was just so like exacerbated.
Yeah.
And then 6 months after graduating, or like just about, I found my first client. It was a retainer client. And he's like an entrepreneur. He's a fashion photographer who happens to be gay, and he needed digital marketing help. So he was my first client. So it helped kind of cushion, the fact that I hadn't been making any money at that point. And then I kind of decided from there, I was like, let's see if I can, get more of clients like these. And one way or another, I like found different, companies, different entrepreneurs, and just kind of like the opportunities kind of just
which is amazing. That's really awesome. Like, you must be so proud and really grateful that has developed into something for you. What an amazing opportunity that's come, and by the sound of it, you've put in partly your passion for the fashion as well as the marketing, and combine the two by targeting that kind of industry. Were the people you had initially also in that industry, or is that something that's sort of come later? You
mean like the people that I
mix the two together, like mixing the two and having the fashion industry as your niche, so to speak?
Yeah, so honestly, just to like rewind a little bit, so I graduated the Fashion Institute of Technology in December 2017 with my marketing degree. And at that point, I had already been working with like some corporate freelance jobs, or like some internships here and there, or like I've already done like these viral projects online, these digital marketing projects, like like master lists. You know what master lists are?
I don't.
Like online. They're kind of like listicles, but it's just like a bunch of, like, for example, like I made a whole project that went viral on Tumblr, because of course Tumblr, which is still a thing, by the way. Nice. But back at that point, Tumblr was at like its height, and I made a master list of LGBT media. So every week I posted a blog. It was just basically a blog, and it was like LGBT movies, and I posted that, and then it went viral. And so like I've already had these experiences, and like I'm a millennial. Like I'm sure like people who know, or like younger millennial, like digital native, right? Like there are many people who don't study marketing at all, and like just know how to use the internet, and know how to target. Like they can't like maybe teach a course on it, but they know it. So it's like, you don't need to go to school for this stuff.
It's part of everyday life for most people.
Yeah, especially now. Yeah. So I graduated, and at that point I kind of was like, okay, I know digital marketing, I know the jargon, like I studied it, it's my skills, and I use it every day. So this is gonna be my thing. Like this is what I'm gonna make money off of. And then at that point I was in a long distance relationship with a French person, and I graduated, and I'm an American. And at that point I was only traveling back and forth to France for about 2 years. And I needed to figure out, or I wanted to like be with them in person. So I had to figure out a visa. So literally within a day, I found a master's program, and it was like the day before the deadline was due for the application. And I did it the day before. And it just so happens that the subject matter, the master, like the field of study, was something that I definitely put my whole heart into. So it was like one of those kind of like, coincidental kind of cards falling into place situation. And it just worked out, because it just started because I wanted to just be with my ex-partner now.
Yeah.
And then it just worked out. So by the next year, in August 2018, I came to Paris. And my whole idea, because it wasn't concrete in my mind yet because I was there to study for 2 years. But in my mind, I was like, this could work. You know, I have my marketing degree and I'm studying fashion in a very academic sense. So I'm going to learn about the industry in a very deep way, in a way that not most people do. So I can combine that in my head in 2018. I could combine that and it'll be great. Now, the downfall to that is that like fashion studies is actually a relatively new field.
Okay.
Are you there? You froze. Okay.
I'm
You
here.
froze.
Yeah.
Okay. You caught that?
I did. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It
So
didn't
so
freeze my end. You're all right.
good. Just wanted to make sure you can.
Fine.
Yeah. So the downfall to that is that fashion studies is actually a relatively new field in academia, right? So like people in academia, I've barely heard of it. And then people outside of academia in like even the business world, in the fashion world, they're like, oh, okay. Like what does that bring
What
to,
is
you know,
that?
people don't understand the value of that. And so
Mm.
2 years go in and I'm just like super engaged and super like just committed to this thing. But in the back of my head, I was always like, I will combine these two because what else do I have? I mean, I like, I mean, it's kind of sad to say it that way, but it's true, you know. I went to the Fashion Institute of Technology. I was always into fashion. And at that point between FIT and Parsons, Paris, which is where I got my master's, I had come out, you know, I started to dress more masculine. I started to like find myself in fashion, which is hard now to articulate, you know, the importance of that to me and how that reflects on society and all that stuff. And that's what I've basically been committing my career to, which is,
And you wrote a thesis on this as well for university, right?
Yeah, for my master's thesis. Yeah. So, you know, that was more so my case studies were museums and exhibitions. So through that experience, I got to travel to Brighton, which at that point was showing the Museum of Brighton was showing the Museum of Transology, which was an amazing thing. I went to Chicago. I went to San Francisco for the first time. That was the first time in my life that I'd been to the Midwest or the West Coast of the States. And it was just really cool opportunities. But it was still hard. Like, you know, I graduated with that master's thesis and it was so hard. Like that medium is so hard to go to a corporate job interview and be like, here, they don't care. They don't care. So I've been basically corporate. Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, but academic too. It's like super, and I have my qualms about academia as well. But I just found no way to like, because the only thing I could really work with the master's thesis that's already kind of set up for me is like becoming a teacher, becoming a scholar, getting my PhD. That's the path, right?
Yeah.
So going out of that path, that predetermined path, you got to get creative with it. And so it's been a struggle for the past like a year and a half to revisit that thesis and reformulate it in a way that is not so jargony and not so academic, you know. So that's why I say like I'm committing like basically my career to figuring out how to articulate these like really because it's bigger than business, you know. It's bigger than, you know, GDP and you know, money and all this stuff. I mean, all that stuff is what we do. We have to market and convince people that, hey, gay people have money and gay LGBT people
gay people have a lot of money at their disposal.
Yeah, maybe
our money is great.
Maybe they need to be catered to, you know. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
That's cool and stuff, but it's much bigger than that.
Of course, yeah.
That's like how I view that's how I view my career and what I do, so I can feel like, you know, that motivation, because otherwise I would be like super disillusioned still, you know, if I didn't include those like marginalized identities. I feel like because I was very like depressed and sad when, you know, like I went to these corporate job interviews and they would just be like, I don't get it. Like I could just see it in their eyes, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, you know, this has been a really cool, you know, diverted path, you could say, from that. And I'm glad I did it. Yeah.
So just going through some of that journey with you,
Sure.
You've talked about a few bumps along the way. You've talked about a few wins. For someone who's relatively new in the last couple of years, what, if you were to turn around now and go back, is there anything that you've learnt along your path to doing this that you would change now that would maybe be beneficial for you earlier?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's always good to just like a side note, it's always good to ask yourself that question, like every once in a while,
Absolutely.
you know, like once
For
I'm
anyone
trying to
in
get it.
business to check in with
Exactly.
themselves. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I mean, one of my mentors told me like get into the habit of writing a journal for your business, like for any new
Okay.
products that you have. And I have the habit of like writing in journals, but for like personal reasons. So I'm trying to introduce that. It's just hard though, because as an entrepreneur, you have so many different projects going on, right? So it's like, like, how do I, it's just hard to tackle that. But that is a good practice to start building. I mean, maybe I would say that because I'm trying to think, it's been a year and a half. And I would say like at the beginning of 2020, I kind of just like hit the ground running, and I was like there was not an off day, and I really burnt myself out. And I would say, oh, I would go back then and really like check in with myself and all that. I don't know, like I just feel like that
Is
really
part of your journey.
is part of my journey. Yeah, and it sounds like really like, oh, I'm a stronger person now because of it, but I really have my qualms about that kind of rhetoric.
Okay, an easier question. You talked about some bumps. What has there been any bumps along the way that you have learned from? And maybe you could tell us a little bit about some of those.
Sure, yeah. So I mean, yeah, so
and the reason I asked that
maybe
question is because part of my question for everyone that I'm interviewing is basically what advice you have for anyone starting out. And part of that is part of the lessons. And so it would just be beneficial for our listeners to hear, what kind of struggles that you might have come across, because, developing ways to what's the word I'm looking for? We all have hurdles in our business. We all have hurdles in our path, in our journey, even in our daily life, as humans. Take that down a notch to LGBTQ plus, person of color. We're all going to experience these bumps. And so just some experiences from yourself that, okay, yeah, I had this bump and this is how I moved through it.
Yeah, so no, it's a good question. Yeah, and it's good that you rephrased it, because I don't know if I would per se go back and like do something differently, because it's kind of led me to this point. But the less I'm definitely like I work on self-awareness a lot. And so I try not to repeat the same mistakes, or I wouldn't say it like that either. I'm very wise about my words, but I try to just learn from my lessons and be mindful of it from the future, so I don't repeat them. And I think that's what's gotten me so far, is just that self-awareness, so checking in on yourself, right? So that's, what I answered originally, just checking on yourself more often, write journals and stuff. But specific hurdles, like one of the biggest the thing that like caused my first burnout, which was in like the end of May, was it? Or March? It was March, or one of the M months. And and I basically, what happened was that I had fired a client, my very first client, and it didn't end the way that it wasn't like super what's the word? It wasn't necessarily amicable, the way that it ended, but it wasn't also like throwing words out and yelling at each other. It wasn't like that at all.
Okay.
But it had basically, the ex-client like said something that later on, after a few weeks, after maybe a month or so, I realized that he was just talking from a point of like, maybe he didn't understand marketing. He didn't understand when it comes to marketing, it takes at least 3 months to see any kind of result, like depending on what you're doing. But we had been working with each other for 2 months, and then at the end of the 2 months, he started to ask for way more than was agreed upon in the contract. And I had been putting my foot down, and I said, I'm not doubling or tripling our weekly meetings. And I'm not going to add this to the workload if you're not going to, pay more. And he threw some things out there and said, oh, it's, I'm not going to get into it, but he said some things that immediately just like hit me, like I, after I fired him, I thought that I would feel better because I knew that all these boundaries had been crossed and I needed to put my foot down. But it was one of those things that, when you do something that is good for you, and you're like, I'm going to feel so much better after I do it, but you don't feel much better. In fact, in fact, it was so terrible just because he had already like hit my self-esteem. So I had to like.
So it had a snowball effect on your self-esteem and your confidence, maybe as well.
Yeah. And then, that's why I said like it took a few weeks, a couple of months to realize that, literally with all due respect, like he just did it. He was a first-time entrepreneur. He didn't have any experience with marketing. So he frankly didn't understand, how marketing works. Yeah. So coming from that, having that insight made me heal a lot better. And then also another part of the recovery was rest, because it was everything. The fact that I was working every single day, the fact that he said, like, we need more. I don't feel like it's enough, like work that you're putting in for the amount that I'm, even though I'm doing I'm doing market research and in these business meetings and seeing all these other marketers who do what I do, charging like way more than me. Everyone's saying like, you should have charged way more. Yeah. So that being said, so rest was like a huge thing, and I really prioritized that. Like as an entrepreneur, it's really easy to just kind of like open up your mail on your phone 20 times a day, check your DMs. It took all summer, and then by the end of the summer, I like had focused on it so much that by the end of the summer, for the first time in my life, and this is just like a big win, for the first time in my life, I would wake up every day and go to sleep every night, and that whole day, my anxiety was at 0.5. Like I'm such an anxious person, and I've always been an anxious person. Yeah. I always get this ball of anxiety in my throat. Like I feel like something's like just squeezing it. For the first time in my life, like I was just not having chronic anxiety because I had been focusing on self-growth. As a person who's
experienced this myself, I know what that win feels like, and I've also had that this last 6 months, so I can empathize with that. That's such a good feeling. So and that came from putting that self-care in.
The self-care, and also just sticking to your guns. It's like if somebody oversteps your boundaries, and this is like not new too, is like backed by like I'm super into like psychology and stuff like that, but it's backed by scientific research of like not every time that you put down your boundaries is going to feel immediately good. And that's what sucks about it. You want to have that instant gratification. You want to be okay with comfort, things that you are familiar with. But you'll see that over time, it might take as little as 2 months, maybe more, because I've had other hurdles since then. That right now I'm in a recovery phase right now, but that was like the first, burnout that I had to deal with. And it took about 2-3 months to really feel comfortable. And then another challenge came up. So, it's like you have to understand that about yourself. Yeah.
As business owners and entrepreneurs, we're putting that time and energy in, and we can get burnt out easily. And so it seems like you're doing the right things in managing those ebbs and flows so that you're not burning yourself out, and really listening to your body. And I think that's an important thing for anyone starting out is to really get in tune with your body, because otherwise you will just keep going and going and going, and then you'll crash and then you're out of action for however long, and that's counterproductive, right?
It's really easy to be like, well, this is where a lot of my anxiety also came from, or it still comes from, and I still work with it every day, but which is that like I think it's also an ADHD thing, which is where like I could be sitting on the couch and it's rest time. Like I even blocked that time on my calendar. This is rest time, please rest. But I'll be sitting there and I'll be so anxious because all I could think about are the 10 million things I need to do. So, why sit here? Let's be productive. Let's wash the dishes, or let's do dry cleaning, or let's do this, or let's do this for my business and whatever. And it's so hard to break out of that cycle, especially because that's just how my mind just is wired. Like I'm always thinking ahead.
That sounds like me, actually.
Yeah, it's very like, we got to talk about it because like it's very hard to break out of that, and
Mhm.
how I still work with it every day. Like it's just, I feel like my mind is hardwired to always think about the future, and it's so hard to live in the moment. And
Yeah.
so, I've been practicing meditation, so mindful meditation every single day since September 2019.
And do you
So
do that
like
guided,
to
or do you do that in silence, or do you do that journaling, or a little bit of everything?
for the most part now, I go in phases. Like right now, I do mostly every day silent meditation, and then sometimes, like I'm part of this meditation group. The Center for Mindful Self-Compassion in Cali has a like 3 times a day Zoom meditations, where like hundreds of people join in every day. So it's really nice to have that guided group experience. Um, Sometimes I'll listen to a podcast like 10% Happier. They have weekly Friday meditations that are really nice. So I'll sprinkle in guided from here.
Nice.
And there, one second, I need to,
Bless you.
there it is. Thank you. Um, and when I started though, I needed to start with guided because like a lot of people will say, and I list the same thing, which is like, I can't shut down my brain, blah, blah, blah. Guided meditation helps with that because
Yeah.
and even to this day, like I struggle with my mind wandering and stuff, even in silent meditation. But the point is to stop and like listen to your body, or like one thing I love is body scans. So just zooming in on a part of your body. So like one thing I love to do is like zooming in on my fingertip, and then you're focusing on it, and then you could suddenly like feel the pulse, right? Feel a
And
pulse in your,
see the
it's
energy
beautiful.
sometimes, for me
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah. So
You're the
that's
second
been
person this
helpful.
week that's been talking about body scans with me. And I think, this is something that I'm hearing from the universe saying to me, okay, don't just do your mind meditation, do the body as well.
Yeah. So and I also ask myself really, really awesome question that I feel like we should ask ourselves a lot. And they talk about this all the time in mindful self-compassion, which is, what do I need right now? Like, what do I need? Like, calm down, and it's like, really, really like give yourself a good amount of time to say, what do I need? Okay, right now I need to take a few breaths. Like right now I need total silence. Right now I need to I need to go to the bathroom, because some people can't really tell, like, oh, I have to go to the bathroom, or, oh, I'm hungry, like, or I'm thirsty. Like a lot of people don't have that. There's a word for it. No, it's not. I'm thinking of another word. Um, so yeah,
So
it's really important to practice that. Yeah.
absolutely, and I agree with you on that as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. But thank you, thanks for that advice
Yeah,
for
sure.
everyone out there as well. And
And
so let's just draw it back in a minute and go to the fact that you are part author of a best-selling book. How exciting is that? That's amazing. And is it true, am I right in saying that that was launched about 18 weeks ago?
um, the dates have because of the pandemic and just supply chain issues. It's like the phrase of 2020. The dates kept changing, but I believe like the pre-order was like October 5th, and then like I honestly I can't remember because like the dates kept
Okay.
changing. But so yeah, I was featured in a book called Thriving in Business: Strategies for the LGBTQ plus Entrepreneur. Yes, and very exciting. I have to say, it was really, really cool to just kind of be there from the beginning, like of Elena Joy, who is the founder of the Pride and Joy Foundation and the Pride and Joy Publishing House, just saying, hey, we want to publish LGBT authors and we want to like expand from there. This is our first book idea. Do you want to join us? And from there, we had a timeline, and I think I wrote it in like late spring. Like that's the timeline we had. We started in early 2020, and then by late spring, like all of the final drafts like were put in, and then by then it was just literally like just waiting for supply chain and stuff like that. So she was dealing with all of that. I was just kind of like, waiting around, as seeing how that would go. I was excited because I knew that it would come out
And
eventually.
did she just
uh,
approach you, or did you have a prior relationship? How did that relationship come about? How were you kind of approached and said, you know, hey, do you want to be part of this and write this book?
I was I was part I don't the timeline's a little
Skewed. That's okay.
fun
It's called
skewed.
COVID time.
Yeah, and that was also around the time that I had that burnout, right? So like,
Yeah,
you know,
okay.
it's all of it is kind of just meshed together. So I think it was around the time that I worked with her to do the LGBT influencer summit. So the Pride and Joy Foundation also does like a summit, and we brought together LGBT influencers like Court and Lex and Queer Indigo and so many other people. And it was also the LGBT family summit. So it was about, you know, bringing, you know, parents of LGBT people together, LGBT parents together. It was all digital. And I did a what is it called? A speech. Yeah, I did a presentation on specifically using LinkedIn
Okay.
to network, but as a queer person, because I feel like this is something that I go over in the presentation and something I go over in the book, which is that as queer people, as LGBT people, and as an entrepreneur of color, as a person of color first, it's intimidating. It's intimidating to network, and then it's even more like if icky. LinkedIn. LinkedIn is very icky. I mean, that's across the board. People who are like young, who are like just entering the workforce, I mean, to not mince my words, like they hate it. Actually, they hate. I've had like at least 5 people tell me that they think LinkedIn is like the worst thing that's ever happened to the internet. You know, because it just feels, you know, I
Do you
go
think
this,
that that opinion is changing at all, or that's just solid set in stone?
I think that it just comes from like this disillusionment of younger people of like, yikes, everything has to be sellable, you know?
Right, okay.
You know, literally every social media platform that I grew up with, you know, is becoming commercialized or heavily commercialized, you know?
Yeah.
So I see all the time, and that's why I love Tumblr, because it's notorious, because nobody can sell on that platform. Like,
right, okay.
Brands try to break through on Tumblr and they cannot. And that's why I kind of like it, because I want to have a non, you know, commercialized platform somewhere in my life, you know, even though I work in marketing. So LinkedIn,
even more so that we work in marketing, I think.
Exactly. I need a
we need a break.
I need a break. I need a
yeah,
and I think we all need that break. And you know, we all have to account for that, this kind of fatigue, right? This fatigue of constantly being sold to, people being aware that they're being constantly sold to, and they get angry about it, or people who don't even care. They're like, I don't care if Facebook takes my you know, information. And again, that's a whole other discussion that I would love to talk about. But what was the where were we originally? Oh yeah, LinkedIn.
Talking about the LinkedIn networking and the book, and because I believe the chapter in the book is also focused on the networking.
It's about networking, but I take LinkedIn out of it because that's quite topical, in the sense of like, literally I could go into strategies on how to use LinkedIn and the features to use, but that could be totally obsolete a few months from now. So I really wanted to take it into a more general thing that could be, that could be a little bit more evergreen. You know, so I kind of, I'm just frank in the presentation, and in the presentation I give practical tools on how to use LinkedIn, but I don't sugarcoat the fact that like people have this disillusionment, right? People are tired of constantly selling themselves. Like, people just want to live, right? That's why I was, you know, it goes back to what I was saying much earlier in the talk, which is like, this is much bigger than business, right?
Yeah.
But we all need to live, and we all need to live with life. We should live life with dignity. And you know, like, you know, I have some of these tools and resources. I'm going to share it with you. And one of the big things of my talk and of the chapter, which is just boundaries, you know. It's like, you know, I wouldn't be mad if like LinkedIn just like poof, you know, tomorrow. I mean, maybe a little bit, because I've built a lot on there, but you know, like, because I understand, I see people my age, younger people, even older, who are like, I'm tired of this, they're disillusioned, you know. To be frank, this anti-capitalist sentiment that I see and I resonate with a lot. But also understanding that like I have $35,000 in debt, and I need to, you know, I want to move to Amsterdam, which is a quite expensive city, and I want to do this and I want to do that. So what do? I build boundaries around, you know, okay, I'm on LinkedIn, but you know, I talk about this in the presentation and in the book, which is you could, you know, you could mute people, you know, you can even block people.
You can
and you don't
block
have
people.
to have you literally, and it's amazing. You could actually, if you go into your settings, there's so many things that you can mess around with, so that when you are on social media, you're not constantly, for example, Instagram is like, was hard for me because it's so visually engaging. And I know that like, I realized this when a few years ago, it's like every time I would log on, I would just get depressed, right? And this is a common experience. I would just get depressed. Once again, that's where self-awareness comes in. Literally, if I open Instagram and within like 5 minutes, I start feeling this like heaviness on my chest.
And just
I know
Instagram for you, like, is it that just that platform for you, or?
It's an example, but that's like really where the most intense is. But it could be on LinkedIn too, because LinkedIn people are talking about the new house they bought, you know, all their, you know. So but it's the same across the board with social media. You can build boundaries. You can, you know,
absolutely. Yeah.
Right. You could go into your settings and say, I don't want to see this kind of post. I don't want to see birthday.
And it's important to do that as well for our.
Yeah, and people don't know you could do that.
Yeah.
People don't know if you could do that. Like you go on your again, just a practical little insight. You go on your newsfeed on LinkedIn and you see a post from somebody that, I don't know, you know, it's up to you. Again, it's up to you. Maybe they said something rude to you 2 years ago and you don't ever speak anymore, and you see them on your newsfeed. You click the 3 buttons and you click don't see any more posts from this person anymore. You click that, boom, right? Or you could go the extra mile and you could disconnect from them on LinkedIn. I wouldn't recommend that, because that's how the bigger your network, the more discoverable you can be. So you have to balance that. You have to, it's really personal. So I talk about that, like, you know, on both aspects. And so, you know, just back to your question of, you know, it was birthed from that presentation when I started to work with Pride and Joy Publishing. And I kind of just zoomed out a little bit, focused on networking in general, and kind of really focused first and foremost on this feeling of disillusionment, this feeling of like, you know, especially being queer people, of like walking into a room and knowing that people know that you're different. And especially if you're a person of color, like dealing with microaggressions. So yeah, it was really cool. And I might say on a personal note, that this was the first time I was able to actually like look at my thesis again. Like it had been it had been almost a year and I had not looked at my thesis, and I was able to kind of re-establish a relationship with my writing, because up until that point I was like, I'd never want to write. I don't want to write again. It was tough. That's a whole other thing too, but it was a great opportunity to explore networking and the nuances that come with that as a queer person, and explore my personal relationship with writing. So it was a really cool opportunity. Yeah.
And so my last question for you is a question that I ask everyone that comes on, and that is, can you name 3 positive things that the pandemic has brought to you in your personal life or your business?
My personal life. So, okay, personal life. Oh yeah, I read the questions that you sent, and I was like, oh, it's gonna be about business. I don't know.
I mean, it mainly is, and it can just be about business. It's up to you how you answer that question. I just throw it in there because sometimes the people I've had on, they've mixed a little of both together. So
yeah, sure. Well, here's the thing. This one, it might be a little bit of a cheat to say, but like I met my girlfriend like only a few months before the pandemic happened.
Okay.
And I don't know, I feel like we would have, if the pandemic, it's really a roundabout way to answer this question, but like if the pandemic happened a couple of months earlier, I don't think that we would have continued our relationship at all. But like the pandemic happening a few months afterwards, I don't know, it's like a weird way to answer the question, because the pandemic allowed for us to bond in a very particular way, challenging, but like because of the physicality of it, like I couldn't be like close to her all the time, but we really worked hard to, both of us made efforts to kind of still keep that connection.
Mhm.
And I don't know, I guess because I met her, actually, I will say that right before meeting her, I thought that I was going to go back to New York after graduating in May. And then I met her and like fell in love within like 2 weeks. We're going to celebrate our 2-year anniversary in a couple of weeks.
Oh,
And
congratulations.
thank you. Thank you. And after meeting her, everything changed. Like I
Mhm.
moved. It's very cheesy, but it's true. I moved to Paris for love, right, for my ex-partner, and then I stayed in Paris for love. So
And I have been to Paris and I've experienced a very short love there, but Paris is definitely the city of love.
well, and then again, the challenge comes with that too, because there's only so much you can do in Paris during a pandemic. So again, big, like large efforts on both of our parts to keep that flame going. I mean, it was there naturally, but
Yes.
you still have to make efforts.
And you still got the
So
pressures
anyways,
of the pandemic, and I'm sure
word.
you had lockdown just like everyone else at some point. So
Oh yeah, that was crazy. So um that's like one thing. She was kind of like the catalyst, and then everything else happened, but we made everything work. And so I wanted to go to New York right after graduating, but then I met her, and then by February I decided, no, I'm going to figure out a way to stay. So I graduate, I have to figure out my visa. Like again, like you just have to make it work. And I think that another thing that just brought me, I don't know, the pandemic brought me a lot. I mean, it also took away a lot from a lot of people, so it's really hard to answer the
absolutely.
question. All I
I
can
think
say
the
is that,
reason
like,
that I asked that question, just to give you a bit of context, is because yes, there are lots of negatives. There's been a lot of struggles to get through. And it's my way of shining a light that there was positives for people during this horrible time as
oh
well.
yeah,
And so the reason that I asked that question is because I myself had some positive wins, and despite the dark times and the times where you think what the hell is going on, amongst that there's been windows of light for me, and by the sound of it for you too, and for other people I've spoken
yeah,
to, for them as well, whether that be personal growth, business growth,
yeah, yeah,
and for yourself, your relationship growing
yeah,
into what it is as well.
yeah. So yeah, I guess for me, because I guess I was taken aback by the personal thing, because the
Yeah,
personal thing
sorry
is
about
just, I see it as
that.
no, it's not you. It's just the way that I look at my growth over the past like 2 years, because I see it as like a journey, like as a snowball, because literally she gave me this for last year. This is her, and that's me.
Nice.
Um, sorry. I'm showing a picture of a painting she did. So
Nice.
I just see like a cause and effect. I see a domino effect in my personal
Okay.
life, because if I
Yeah.
hadn't met her, all these other things. But let me make a little bit, maybe it's like my ADHD working in overdrive, but like let me just break it down into like very, very specific things. So one, in my personal life, one, finding the meditation community,
Mhm.
specifically the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion in California, because they didn't have this before the pandemic, but during the pandemic they started doing like daily meditation groups. And
Okay.
literally at the beginning of the pandemic I was joining all of them, like 2 times a day for 45 minutes. And then they brought in like LGBT affinity groups, actually. So they have a
Matt.
weekly meditation group
Amazing.
for LGBT people, and a monthly group for BIPOC. So really cool. That's one thing. Another thing is just, I don't know, I guess the pandemic brought me connection with the world around me, like, you know, appreciating the parks, the parks of
Yeah.
Paris, there's a lot
Yeah.
of beautiful parks in Paris. Just taking a walk around the block, or just the neighborhood, discovering the neighborhoods. um that's another thing that it brought to me. And just another was just, it's really important to have physical connection with the people around you, with your little group around you, but it allowed me to, reconnect with a lot of people,
Mhm.
and learn about myself in very personal deep ways. So I would say those things. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. And yeah, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. You know, I think what you're doing is amazing. The fact that you have a book out there is a really big achievement. And I've been enjoying listening now, but also connecting with you along the way. I feel, you know, in the sense that you and I connected around a similar time to me and you and some other LGBTQ plus entrepreneurs. And I kind of feel like even though we're on separate journeys, we're also on the wave of that connection journey, and from different areas of the world. So yeah, thank you so much for coming and having this chat today. It's been lovely to meet you in not the flesh, but in person. And I really appreciate that. So
Yeah, thank you so much for reaching out to me. This was really fun. I talked about things that I haven't had the opportunity to talk about in the past. So yeah, I'm looking forward to I don't know, seeing you around the space.
and I'm looking forward to seeing what's next for you as well. Thanks everyone for listening, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button.